Hi, it's Paul Banis of GreatDad.com, and thank you very much for joining either the podcast or the YouTube version of the podcast. I'd really appreciate it if you took just a second to subscribe either on your podcast app or in YouTube. It doesn't really do anything. It's not going to send you any emails. It's just going to show up more often on your feed, and it does me a lot of good in terms of getting more exposure for this work I do to support dads. I'd also like to invite you to come to my page, GreatDad.com/go, if you'd like to discuss more about any of the issues that we are covering within the podcast, especially if there's any way I can help you to be a sounding board in your own struggles to be a dad and to be there for your family. So take a look at that. It also includes a link to my course on gratitude, where at GreatDad.com/gratitude with a offer to take that course for free. So see you in a second. Hey, it's Paul Banis with GreatDad.com, and I'm here with my weekly series talking about fatherhood and modern fatherhood. And I've got a guest today talking about something that maybe is going to come off as very contentious and very clickbaity. But we're going to talk about men and fatherhood today, and with the perspective of, as we have in the background, male-friendly media. We're going to talk with Jack Kammer. Welcome, Jack.
Hello, Paul. Nice to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
So I guess right away you see the sign behind you, male-friendly media, and you think, oh my God, we're going to be talking about something that is very much like the kind of the guests that I try to avoid, which are the kind of the bodybuilder, uber masculine Jack Tate kind of characters who come off. They really want to be aggressive. They want to reassert masculinity. They think all the problems of today are because men have become wimpy and because there are too many questions about sexual identity and everything. But I think you and I maybe are going to have more of a constructive talk about what modern masculinity maybe could look like, rather than look back at what it used to be with remorse and regret. Would that be fair?
Yes, that's perfectly fair. As a matter of fact, the branch of the men's movement that I have grown out of is the branch of the men's movement that was very happy at the idea of the women's movement,
Yeah.
because the women's movement was going to supposedly also be concerned about how gender inequality adversely affects men. It was supposed to allow us to de-emphasize making money. We'd be alleviated from some of that stress. So we were pretty excited about it, and it didn't turn out that way. And
Yeah.
so we aren't saying to hell with feminism. We're saying, feminism, let's go. Let's finish this thing, and let's not stop where the benefits also flow in the direction of men. And that's been a very difficult proposition.
Yeah.
To,
Yeah.
to
Well, yeah, I totally agree with you. I think feminism started out with, for a lot of us men. I grew up in the 60s and 70s, and also grew up in a feminist household with a single mom, as a living with a single mom as an only child, and I was very much bought into the whole idea of feminism, not only for the sake of my mom and for other women, but because it was going to bring about equality. And now we seem to have gotten into this discussion like, if one rises and the other one has to fall. So feminism now is about bringing men down in some way, or a continuous assault of what we keep on talking about, the patriarchy, as if we all belong to some club where we all have these special permits and membership and stuff that totally excludes everybody else. Whereas I think most men would say, yeah, maybe from time to time, or certainly in the past, there were a lot more benefits that accrued to men just generally, but men in general today I don't think they really feel like they are getting a pass or entry to the secret club that maybe some do.
yes, I think it's important to point out that many of the privileges that men were given to men because of the obligations and responsibilities
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and expectations that were
Yeah.
placed upon us. If the society expects us to make money, to focus on making money, to leave the house every day and go work 12, 18 hours a day making money, then, you need to have the tools you need to be making that money.
Right.
And yes, it's wonderful to be able to make money. But the real power of money isn't who makes it, it's in who spends it. And men were not singularly and only taking the money home to spend for themselves. They were spending it
Yeah.
on the people they loved and
Yeah.
the people who were counting on them.
Yeah, there were a lot of
And
men who felt totally enslaved during that whole period too. There, what was that? What was it? Was it Thoreau, or maybe it was Thurber?
Thoreau,
Quiet
quiet
desperation. I
desperation.
mean, I think a lot of men went through that feeling like every day they had to slow. As much as the woman probably felt like, oh, she was stuck with making three meals a day, the man felt like, I'm stuck with this existential plight of the system we work in, and didn't have any other paradigm to look at it through. But like, I get back to what we all hoped, that this was going to be an equality of choices and would liberate us all to be our best selves rather than a power struggle.
Yes. And speaking of the origins of feminism, how it was at its beginning days, and by feminism here I mean the second stage, the stage that began in about the early 1960s. Some would point to right after World War II with Rosie the Riveter,
Yeah,
sort
yeah.
of sort of encouraging women to recognize that they could do more than just stay at home. But Betty Friedan in 1963 wrote The Feminine Mystique. And I read that book maybe 10 years ago just to sort of see what it was about. Because I sort of think of myself as a little bit of a historian of the equal rights struggles. And I was surprised to find that Betty Friedan was really, really, really friendly to men. Not so far as to say, oh, men never do anything wrong, but she also said women do things wrong too. What she said in The Feminine Mystique was, men are not exactly having a picnic here.
Right.
And she even went so far as to approve of, she mentioned and approved of a magazine article from Red Book in 1962, I think it might have been. The cover of that Red Book edition teased this article that Betty Friedan was approving of with the words, "Why Young Husbands Feel Trapped." And Betty Friedan said, we need to pay attention to this. In 1980, also writing in Red Book herself, she said, the dialogue has gone on too long in terms of women alone. Let men join women at the center of the second stage. Now, this was in 1980, after she had been a co-founder of the National Organization for Women in the early 60s. And so after, 17, 15, 14 years of seeing the women's movement sort of wander away from where she wanted it to be, she said, this is wrong. This is too much in terms of women alone. And so, people like me, I would find it difficult to say, yeah, I'm a feminist, because the word has really, I think, been sort of bashed and twisted, and it's got a lot of tarnish on it, and it's been a little bit tortured. So I don't want to say I'm a feminist, but I can definitely say that I am all about anti-sexism.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I just want anti-sexism to apply to men as well as women. And, to get a little bit contentious here, because I sometimes think it's necessary in terms of establishing a little empathy in women for the plight of men, or for the situation of men, if plight isn't quite the right word. I like to say the most sexist idea of all is the belief that only one sex is ever sexist. That would be men.
Right.
And only one sex is ever harmed by sexism. That would be women.
Right.
That's the most sexist idea of all.
Yeah.
And if we really want to be anti-sexist, we need to have and equality of the discussion. You know, if feminism were a hydroelectric dam being proposed today, or an airport runway extension being posed today, it would never be allowed to happen. Why? Because there was no environmental impact statement. There was no consideration of the ecosystem. It was just, we want this and we're going to get this. There was never any discussion of, well, okay, let's talk about this. How will this affect children? How will this affect men? How will this affect our economy? How will this affect education? How is this going to affect crime? How is this going to affect addiction among men who might feel that they are no longer valued for their traditional role? How are we going to help men feel respected in adopting non-traditional roles? None of that has happened. There was never any email, didn't exist back then. No phone call to men to say, hey, fellas, listen, we're interested in having some more options in our lives. And we recognize that this is a very complex ecosystem, a social system in which we live. And so it's just smart for us, it's smart for everybody, for us to ask you as well, what would you like? What would anti-sexism look like to you?
Yeah.
The question was never asked. And we can get a little contentious here, but I think it's true. The reason we were never asked was because as the women's movement began, and guys like you and me were saying, yeah, this is going to be great for men. We'll be able to spend more time with our kids. We'll have less pressure on working 18 hours a day. It's going to be good for us too. We started talking about equality of parenthood, for fathers being regarded as equal to mothers. Not the same, not identical, but just as good, just as important. There were women who said, I don't know if I want to, really share that.
Right.
And so the women's movement had a problem. How do we get more and more women to join the women's movement when they have this fear that they're going to lose what for many women is the most precious thing in their lives, which is their primary relationship with their children, and they're feeling that they are essentially really the CEO of the family unit.
Yeah.
How do we get
some of them chose that because they want to do that, but other ones had that foisted upon them by societal expectations. But that's the paradigm they were living in, is that that's what women do. We stay at home, we take care of the family, and our success is the family's success, whether we we naturally want to do that or not.
Yes, and just as the paradigm for men was,
exactly. Yeah,
you're going to go make money. So how did the women's movement solve its problem of being able to encourage women in and assure them, now, don't worry, you'll still be in charge of the family? Well, how are you going to do that? We're going to call men oppressors. Because they are our oppressors, they are our enemy.
Right.
And we don't need to regard them as partners. We don't need to ask them what our movement should look like for them. You're oppressors. If they're oppressors, we get to completely ignore them at best, or try to smash them, destroy them, and defeat them at worst. And I think that is a large part of what has happened here. And that's why, to me, even though I'm not a father, I sort of missed that boat. I was never able to find, I was born in 51, so I was never able to find a woman who was, progressive enough to say, I'm not going to expect you to make all the money, and I'm going to honor and nurture your parenting instinct, because I think I had a pretty strong one, still do. Love babies, love kids. So my goal was to have fatherhood recognized as the equal of motherhood.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that kept women out of men's traditional sphere was a whole panoply of stereotypes. about why women really didn't belong in business and government and academia and science. Women cry too much. They're too silly. They just want to have their fingernails done. They want to go shopping. They just
Right.
want to watch soap operas. They can't make decisions. They just want to please everybody. All of these stereotypes about women were used to keep women out of the traditional male space. I think that today what's happening is that all of this male bashing, all of these horrible things we are hearing in the media about men, men are violent, men are clueless, men can't multitask, men are sexual abusers, men are sexual harassers. All of these things, I believe, are the equivalent of the stereotypes that kept women out of traditional male spheres. The stereotypes in male bashing against men are designed, I think, serving very strongly the purpose of keeping men in a secondary position to women in the family. Now, it's true that there are many women, especially women who have fabulous careers, who really do want men to be more involved at home.
Yeah.
But there's two things that need to be said about that. Number one, they want men to be involved at home, fully invested in their kids until they don't want that anymore. When might they not want that anymore? When they fall in love with somebody else, when they want to get a divorce, when it's just not, they've grown apart. And so I'm going to, I've been seeing John, I've been seeing my tennis instructor, whatever it is, whatever the reason is, it happens. That's why we have no fault divorce, nobody's fault, it just happens. And so we're going to get a divorce, and I'm, of course, taking the kids, and I'm going to go to Indiana, where I'm going to get a faculty position at this university, and you can come out a couple of times a summer to see the kids that you have invested your heart and soul in.
Yeah.
At my request and in support of my career. That's the first thing that needs to be said. Second thing that needs to be said is not every woman has a fabulous career.
Yeah.
Where they need a man to support them in pursuing their fabulous career. Many women just have jobs, 9-to-5 jobs, and
a lot of men do too. I mean,
yes, exactly. And item 2B, lots of women don't even have jobs. Their job is to stay at home, raise the kids, and that is what gives them their fulfillment. And so many of those women are really not interested, even today, in having men be equal to them in the raising of her children, his children too, but pathologically, a little bit pathologically, it's not recognizing that, the father is also very much in love with these kids. And the kids really are in love with their dad. Yeah. And they need him just as much as they need you. So to me, fatherhood is the central issue for all men, whether we are fathers or not, because if we can tear down the idea that men are stupid, ignorant, clueless, rude, thoughtless, mean, violent, that benefits all men. Because whether I'm a father or not, if I'm involved in a disagreement with a woman of any kind, or even if I'm not involved with a woman, involved in this situation with a woman in disagreement in any way, maybe I'm just suspected of a crime of some sort. If men have the branding of being bad,
yeah,
we're more likely to get nailed for things that we probably don't deserve to get nailed for.
Yeah, well, this is a huge issue in our cultures because we think of these things as monolithically, that women are this way and men are this way, and every time there's a bad actor, right now at least, the bad actors are a lot of men. We ascribe that to all men, and I know a lot of feminists, a lot of women will say, they hate that idea of like not all men, like I'm one of the good ones. Well, no, you're all bad. Because that's just who you are in general. You are a group of people who are all bad, and just by saying you're one of the good ones does not exempt you from the guilt of your entire your entire sex. It's endlessly confusing to me that there are so many men who want to do the right thing and who are trying to be, allies in the current parlance, but um, the division of the sexes seems to be something that is, I don't know if it's been around for forever, if this is just a thing that comes from the 20th century, but that we keep on focusing on these differences that pull us apart rather than bring us together in its complementariness.
Yes, well, that again is why fatherhood is such a central issue, because we have, over the past 60 years, done a really good job of welcoming women. It's not complete, it's not 100%, it's not perfect, but we've done a really good job of welcoming women into the world that was traditionally male. Government,
Yeah.
politics, even sports,
Yeah, there are plenty of industries
acad
where
acad
women dominate.
academia,
Yeah, yeah,
science.
definitely in academia.
We've done a much better job welcoming women as fully invested, fully accepted, fully respected, honored, their capabilities respected and tapped and harnessed and given full expression than we have in the other direction for men. And I believe it is that fierce rearguard action on the part of many, many women saying, you guys are no good. You don't deserve to be regarded as the equal of me in the wonderful world of nurturing children because, we're just sort of better than you at that.
Yeah.
It's that rearguard action that causes women to throw these spears at us that is really sort of going in one direction. Now, there are men who are fed up with this and they're starting to throw spears back in the other direction, but those men are regarded as sort of fringe, and lots of people recognize their pathology.
Right.
Even if they can understand the anger, they sort of wish these guys weren't so angry. Whereas an angry woman who wants to lambast all men as being poisoned by testosterone is regarded as somehow a feminist champion. And she's pursuing social justice for all women. No, she's pursuing privileges, unequal privileges for all women. Now,
Well,
not
yeah, they want to see the balance go back the other way. And they
yes.
don't want it, nobody wants to say it like that, but there is a certain amount of it's a zero sum game, and I can't be a full person without taking away your thing. But it sounds like there are two different issues here. One is, can men be good parents? That's our tagline for GreatDad.com for the last 20 years has been, because dads don't always think like moms. And that's the case. We have different parenting styles. There's certainly a lot of overlaps. There aren't a million ways to feed a baby or to change a diaper or whatever, but there are a lot of very well researched ways of parenting that men do differently than women, and neither one is right or wrong, but there is a role for both. But then the other thing that distracts us a lot or confuses this whole issue is that men are more often prosecuted for sex crimes, for abuse, for abuse of kids in a lot of cases, and women aren't as often accused of those crimes, and I don't think are guilty as often of those crimes. So there is this problem that we have that relates to some portion of men, and I don't know whether the answer to that is trying to get at the fact that most men are innocent, or the fact that the expectations from men societally have been so much lower in terms of what caregiving is, that we need to raise those standards so that young men know from a very early age that caregiving is a very important, responsible role.
So as a retired social worker, I think I can honestly, correctly say that the majority of child abuse in this country is committed by women. Now, why is that? It's not because women are worse than men. It's because of the situation in which women find themselves. They're more likely to be with the kids all day than the man is. And they're more likely to sort of lose it because of the difficulties
Okay,
and
so we're talking
stress in
about
their
child abuse
lives.
versus sexual abuse. So child, yeah, okay, that makes
Okay,
sense.
yes. So the same is true of domestic violence. It's typically thought of as something that men do to women, but the best research shows that women initiate violence against their husbands as much as men initiate violence
Mm.
against their wives. Now, on the issue of sexual abuse, I would love to see this considered much more fully than it is. But sex is related to emotions, it's related to touch, it's related to feelings of acceptance, feelings of belonging.
Hmm.
And I think that we can draw a very bright line, very strong connections between the way men are raised, the way men are treated, and those other good things of being accepted just for who they are, being loved just for who they are, receiving touch from other people without anybody suspecting that they have to say, no homo, you know?
Right, right.
So, yes, I do believe it's true that men are more likely to commit sexual offenses than women are. But if we were to change men's milieu, their lives, their expectations, what they get just by virtue of being regarded as human beings and members of our society worthy of all of the love and good things that women get, I think we would see sex crimes, sexual misbehavior of men going down. For instance, think of Harvey Weinstein. Yes, he was a very powerful Hollywood mogul, very powerful. But in some ways, he didn't feel very powerful at all because the power that he wanted was the power of being accepted, touched, having somebody just regard him as a human being, regardless, not connected to the fact that he could make them a star.
Right, right.
And now he's an extreme, but I think there are many men at less extreme strata in society who are committing acts of sexual harassment just as sort of stupid, clumsy ways of saying, hey, could we get together? You know, I would really love to hug
Right.
you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
You know,
that's a whole nother. Yeah. That's a whole other subject. Of what is sexual harassment?
Science shows that there really are physiological benefits just from being touched, just from being touched.
Yeah.
Just, it doesn't have to be sex, but in our minds, and the way I think sex has been sort of, I don't know, you could say cornered by women. It's controlled by women. And so, well, you can't have, you can't, touch is not something that we give to men regularly. Women get it all the time. They'll hug each other and, but, men sort of have to earn it. If you score a touchdown, somebody will come and pat you on the butt
Right.
or hug you because, you
Right.
scored a touchdown. So, if we could treat men more like human beings with all of the good things men want and need, I think we would see sexual crimes going down.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it is. It really is a struggle right now in terms of trying to celebrate our humanity rather than celebrating our differences. And when it enters into the home, we know Scott Galloway is talking a lot about this right now. It's getting a lot of press, thankfully, about how boys are not being treated as well in school and don't have the same opportunities in college. Men are going to college far less than women. Women are quite often the are becoming more often the breadwinners. Men are taking a more passive role. Women are saying, why do we even need these men at all to begin with? And it's not a matter of like men are naturally lazy and abusive. It's the way the systems have kind of evolved now to give advantages to women, give plenty of opportunities to women, which we celebrate. But how do you do that in a way that doesn't have to bring down men at the same time and rationalize it by saying, "Oh, we've got this whole history of abuse, therefore it's kind of okay."
My belief is that if we were to ask young men who are thinking about their futures and trying to decide whether or not they want to go to college, or deciding whether or not they even want to finish high school, or deciding whether or not they even want to come out of their parents' basement and stop playing video games, if we were to ask them, what would a happy life look like for you in 20 years?
Yeah.
I think that if we really had the courage to ask the question and apply some good psychological techniques towards getting these young men to open up, to say things that they know might be controversial, what they would say is, well, I would really, really, really like to be a more involved father than my father was.
Yeah.
Certainly more than my grandfather was. What's the motivation for them? What's the motivation for young men these days to work really hard, to go out and make another paycheck when the mother is already able to make her paycheck? Where's the benefit? How does he get appreciated there? How does he get respected there? The solution, again, needs to be that we complete this enterprise of making things equal between men and women, and allowing those young men to know that if they apply themselves to whatever it is that they and a woman agree on he needs to be doing as part of the marital contract that they're going to forge, if he knew that if he says, I really want to be an involved father,
Yeah.
in my future, and I want to be there when the grandkids are born, and I don't want to be the guy who was left 30 years ago because of a divorce with your grandmother, there would be a lot more motivation, a lot more incentivization for men to play the game we want them to play. Now, it's not the traditional game that we've always wanted men to play, but it's the role of helping create happiness in future generations. How do we keep this country going? How do we make sure that our kids grow up happy and they continue it on down the line? It's not going to continue on down the line if young men sort of look at their fathers and grandfathers and say, wow, they're kind of really not respected anymore. They're kind of troglodytes. They're kind of dinosaurs. What's there for me?
That's my worry, is that that we look at like Trump's new cabinet, or we look at the inauguration, we see all these, rich white men, and we say, where are the women? And we act as if that's what America is what we're just seeing on this particular stage. And that's not the way it is across all kinds of families and individual situations. And I think you're really right, is that we need to be posing these same questions. And that's one of the reasons I became a coach and coach fathers, is to help men think through all these issues of what do you want versus what you're expected to do out of some ancient paradigm or some new paradigm. But what is it for you? And finding the person who will live with you, whether it's a man or a woman, who shares a belief and an interest in your satisfaction and your completion as a human being, rather than just being stuck in what we were doing before. I think that's one of the basic questions. Like you said, what do you want to, where do you want to be in 20 years, and how are you going to get there? And how does that look like? What does that look like if you have a partner who has maybe different expectations of what he or she wants at the same time?
In addition to asking, what do you want, to these young men, we need to ask ourselves, what are we willing to make sure they have?
Yeah.
And right now, we are not willing to make sure that if they invest heavily in their kids, that their investment is protected. We are not willing to do that. I'm a big supporter of the idea. It's a very non-sexist idea, a very feminist idea, depending on how you use the term, of a rebuttable presumption for joint custody in the event of divorce. Now, you know that term, right? Rebuttable presumption? Okay. Only 3 states in the country have...
Why don't you describe for people what that is?
Okay, so let's take the term rebuttable presumption. In criminal cases, we all know and cherish the idea, even though sometimes it's a problem and it might not be exactly the ideal situation, but in criminal cases, we all appreciate the idea that the defendant is innocent until proven guilty. That's a presumption. We presume that he's innocent. It's rebuttable because the prosecutor can say, oh no, let me show you the evidence to rebut his presumption of being innocent. So that's a rebuttable presumption of innocent until proven guilty. In divorce cases, a rebuttable presumption for shared parenting would be father, mother, a divorce. We assume, our presumption is that the father loves the kids, the mother loves the kids need the father, the kids need the mother. If we're going to throw that into the trash bin and tell him that he's got to leave and that he's going to see his kids, every 2 weeks and overnight on Wednesdays, which is, the traditional thing, then you've got some work to do. You don't get to just say, well, she's the mother, so of course she's going to get the goodies here. She's going to get the primary relationship with the kids. We say, we both do. Nobody has to worry that they are going to be annihilated as parents.
Yeah.
The social science is pretty strong. I would say very strong. Over the past 10 or 15 years, it's becoming very clear that a rebuttable presumption for joint custody is the best starting place for the children of divorce. Sometimes the presumption is going to be rebutted very thoroughly. Yeah. And either the father's going to be diminished or the mother's going to be diminished. But that's after somebody has brought forth some really strong evidence that joint custody, shared parenting is not right for these kids. So, if you ask a young man, oh, you want to be a really heavily invested father? Oh, that's so wonderful. It's so wonderful that you're a caring man. But that can be just setting him up for disaster and maybe even suicide if, despite all of the love and devotion and caring he puts into his kids, he's thrown away.
Yeah.
And young men see this. They know this.
Yeah.
They see it happening to the fathers of their friends and to their buddies. And
I don't know what the statistics are. And I mean, you hear the horror stories, the anecdotes about this, and I've had several experts on divorce and divorce law. But I don't know if it's as common as it was back in the 50s and 60s, where women got the custody and men were stuck with the alimony or child support that they didn't pay, which was kind of the paradigm at the time.
Yes. It is getting better, but as I mentioned, there are only 3 states that have a rebuttable presumption for shared parenting. There are states that allow shared parenting, but the situation there is that the man really has to make a strong case for why it's appropriate. And we also have to rely on the goodwill of the mother not to use some of the tricks she can pull out of her bag to overcome the presumption. All she's got to do is say, the kids really don't want to be with him. Tell the nice judge kids about who you want to be with.
Yeah.
Right? It's called parental alienation. And there are some very strong women's organizations these days who want to say parental alienation is a myth. It never happens. It's baloney. When men say that they are being alienated from their kids, it's really just to cover up their violence
Yeah.
against their
Yeah.
kids.
Yeah, sadly, I've had a lot of clients in that situation where they had a perfectly good relationship with their kids, and then suddenly it wasn't good, and a lot of it can be traced back to the whole divorce thing. And the divorce system does not help our children in these cases because it is an adversarial system, and lawyers, even the best among them, will use all the tricks they can to make sure that they satisfy their clients. So
And the rebuttable presumption for joint custody can very much reduce the adversary nature of divorce because, again, neither parent needs to go on a war footing thinking, oh my God, she's trying to kill me, or oh my God, he's trying to
yeah,
take the kids away from me.
right.
No, you can both relax and you can both stop thinking about yourself. Let's think about what's best for the kids. And oh, yeah, it looks like they really need both of us, and that's how they'll be happiest.
Yeah.
The ideal thing is to have a happy marriage. But if you're not going to have a happy marriage, what do you do in its place? This is the second best thing.
Yeah.
You have a happy divorce.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground here. I think maybe we would have benefited from focusing on one of the many aspects of this the war of the sexes that's gone on for at least 100 years, if not millennia and millennia, because there are just so many differences, and like so much in our culture right now, it's just ripe for pushing on the differences and the conflict rather than coming together on this basic human rights belief in the humanity of us all and rising us all up rather than pulling some part of us down to bring the other up. And it's hard to watch. And I'm glad you're speaking out. I'm sure you get into a lot of situations where it's like, oh, you're fighting for men. That means you're against women. And I get involved in those same kind of conversations as a very old lefty, progressive, very liberal, very pro women, but also very worried about the stories I hear about what's happening with young men and young boys, and they should not be, they are not Donald Trump. They are not the person that's people want to hate right now. They have all the potential to be really good citizens at the same time.
And it's really heartbreaking to see how that's sort of being wasted.
Yeah, yeah, because both men and women have immense potential, both for their careers and as moms and dads. Okay, Jack. Well, people can find you at malefriendlymedia.com, and you've got a bunch of different books, and some of them do have titles that maybe are sound a little bit less less progressive than they are. Goodwill Toward Men, and then another one, If Men Have All the Power, How Come Women Make the Rules? But I think they're questions that people need to ask because these are these are all these arguments are things that live in this gray world of, yes, there are pluses and there are minuses. There are men who take advantage, but there are women who take advantage. There are advantages to women staying at home, and there are lots of disadvantages. There's all this stuff, and it's not one size fits all kind of situation. So the more we talk about it, I think the better we are, and certainly if you are a dad or a younger person thinking about being a dad, trying to get ahead of it and think about what you really want out of life is so important. And you need to kind of break through the paradigms and think about what you want rather than what society wants or wanted 50 years ago. All right. Is there anything else we need to add about your other services? You can find again, malefriendlymedia.com.
Yeah, no, that'll do it. If we're running out of time, we can stop it right here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Jack. Maybe we'll see you again. I'm also trying to get a podcast together with my 20-year-old son to talk about some of these issues related to the definition of masculinity in the current world, because he's got some real lived experiences of what it's like today. And I think we've done a good job of raising him to be a very sensitive pro female man, but he also lives in a world that brings up a lot of questions all the time.
Very good. That sounds like a great idea for a podcast.
Yeah. Okay, great. Paul Baines
Thank
at
you.
GreatDad.com. You can find my coaching services, including conversations about fatherhood and about your role. And I'm always open to a free session if anybody wants to engage in that conversation. I always say any coach who offers you some free time to talk about just you and you alone is really worth taking advantage of it. You can do that every week and have a free coaching session. So take advantage of mine. You can find that at GreatDad.com/go. Okay, till next time, stay strong.
Take care.